Hey, good evening, everyone, and I would like to welcome you to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Vicksburg District's public meeting for draft supplement number 2 to the 1982 Yazoo Area Pump Project Final Environmental Impact Statement. Now, I am Colonel Robert Hilliard. I am the commander of the Vicksburg District, and I'll be the moderator as well for tonight's event. And so on behalf of the entire district and the entire Corps community, I'd like to thank you for joining us here this evening. We certainly appreciate your interest in this project and your engagement in this important process. As you are aware, we are streaming this meeting on Facebook Live. And we are recording this as well so that we can play it again and so you could be able to access this again following its conclusion. And so we'll get into the mechanics a little bit of how that's going to work as far as comments here in just a second. But what we have for you up front are a couple of videos. And those are presentations, relatively short, but it gives you one. It'll be a statement from me on the process and what the purpose of this meeting is, and then from the project managers on an overview of that final impact statement. And then following that, we'll get into the mechanics of the meeting and how we're going to be taking questions. So with that, would you please play the opening videos? Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Colonel Robert Hilliard, Commander of the Vicksburg District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I first want to thank each and every one of you joining us today for this public meeting on the Yazoo Area Pump Project Draft Supplemental Number 2. By being with us today, you're showing that you have an interest in this incredibly important project and that you want to be a part of this important step in the NEPA process. Your interest and involvement is very important to the overall transparency of the development of the plan, whether today in this public meeting or through comments submitted during the ongoing public comment period that started on the 16th of October and continues all the way through 30 November. The historic backwater flood of 2019, as well as in 2020, covered over 500,000 acres for 6 months and detrimentally impacted large amounts of aquatic species and wildlife. As the 2019 floodwaters receded, it was determined that it was the right time to conduct analysis on data that has been collected over the past decade during routine management of the backwater area. During those years, the Vicksburg District, in conjunction with the Engineer Research and Development Center, also located here in Vicksburg, gathered data from monitoring wells in order to better understand the overall hydrology of the area. That data, along with updated modeling technology, has given us a fundamentally better understanding of how much of an impact precipitation plays in maintaining wetlands in the backwater area. In fact, published data now shows that approximately 87% of the wetlands are sustained by annual precipitation alone, rather than overbank flooding. In fact, the new data shows that the operation of the pumps will not convert any wetlands to uplands. This is a significant departure from the results in any previous analysis. We now better understand how the project, which has been part of the design from the beginning, can be operated to balance the system to the benefit of aquatics, wildlife, and human interaction in the area. The draft supplement number 2 lays out what we now know and understand about the area, as well as our best engineering approach to both protect the environment while also minimizing the impact of devastating floods like the ones we've seen over the past several years. I simply ask all of you to read the draft supplement number 2, seek to understand the science and engineering, and then let's have a conversation about the best path forward for the entire area. Of course, we'd love to have this public meeting in person, but given the current COVID-19 environment, we've chosen to hold this meeting virtually. So after these opening comments, we'll provide a slideshow overview of the draft supplement number 2, and then we'll move into the comments section of the agenda. If you have a Facebook account and you're connected through that account, you'll be able to write comments directly to us. And we'll work through those comments as we receive them as quickly as we can in the allotted time that we have. The comments that we don't get to in this meeting will be added to the comments that we've already received in the open public comment period and will be addressed before we publish the final report. Again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your input.
So at this time, we would like to present some additional videos from the Senior Project Manager, Ken Parrish, and the NEPA Project Manager, Sarah Timms. They give an overview of the overall report. So if we'll play those videos, please.
Good evening. Thank you, Colonel Hilliard, for your introductory remarks. My name is Kent Parrish, and I am the Senior Project Manager for the Yazoo Backwater Project. I appreciate your participation in this virtual public meeting and look forward to your input. But first, I'm going to discuss the study area, authorization, project history, the 2007 recommended plan, and the current updated recommended plan. Then we'll hear from Ms. Sarah Timms, our NEPA coordinator, about the NEPA process and the various models we utilize to measure the impacts. And then we would like to hear from you. We will take your questions by any one of three methods. These methods will be highlighted on my last slide. This slide highlights the three major areas of the Yazoo Basin. The Yazoo Basin has a total drainage area of approximately 13,400 square miles, of which we will be discussing the area which is crosshatched tonight. However, the drainage area for the Yazoo Backwater area is the entire area called Sunflower and contains 4,093 square miles of drainage, which is shown in green. While the drainage area is approximately 4,093 square miles, the actual study area extends from just north of Vicksburg northward to where Highway 12 bisects the delta, a study area of 926,000 acres encompassing all or parts of 6 counties in Mississippi and 1 parish in Louisiana. The project was authorized by Congress in the Flood Control Act of 1941. It was a compromise that was brokered after many years of discussion between the congressional delegations of Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi to modify the original MR&T project to better address the flood control needs of these states. The authorization was originally for 3 separate structures and pumps, one on the Sunflower River, one on Deer Creek, and one on Steel Bayou, for a total pumping capacity of 14,000 CFS. From this slide, you can see that the later reports changed the original authorization to delete the Big Sunflower and Deer Creek drainage structures and pumps, and to include a 27-mile-long connecting channel to connect these streams to Steel Bayou. This in turn allowed for the construction of 1 pump, with the construction being deferred at that time. In addition, the flood of record in recent times was in 1973, when the Yazoo Backwater area didn't have flood protection and the water elevation went to 101.3. In 2019, the floodwaters behind the Yazoo backwater levee rose to 98.2. This slide shows the completion dates of the various features in the Yazoo backwater area. The elevation of the Yazoo backwater levee is currently 107.0, which protects the area from the Mississippi River floodwaters, but doesn't help when excess rainfall occurs over the 4,093 square mile drainage area of the Big Sunflower River. The only way to remove these trapped waters from behind the Yazoo backwater levee when the Mississippi River is high and all the structures are closed is a pump. This slide depicts the timeline of what events happened in the 1980s when the study and the final EIS were completed. Construction was initiated and later halted due to a change in cost-sharing requirements for the local sponsor. This slide highlights the guidance that directed a reformulation of the project in 1993. The reformulation culminated in a new report and Supplement 1 to the 1982 final EIS in October 2007. 5 separate arrays of alternatives were evaluated with numerous non-structural, structural, and combination plans considered prior to the selection of a recommended plan. In fact, this plan was not the National Economic Development Plan, but a plan that provided additional protection to the environmental resources. The Vicksburg District sought and received permission to deviate from the NED plan, which allowed for an additional 2 feet of floodwaters prior to initiation of pumping. However, even with this change, and the support from the local sponsor to make this change, EPA still vetoed the project under Section 404C of the Clean Water Act in August 2008. From the time of completion of the 2007 report and Supplement 1 to the 1982 final EIS, the district continued to gather data from numerous flood events and long-term monitoring of wetland areas and the effects on aquatic resources. This slide shows a map of completed Yazoo backwater features near the Steel Bayou structure. Here are some facts about the Steel Bayou structure. Note that the maximum flow out of the structure can go to 45,000 CFS, and the pump is only capable of pumping 14,000 CFS. This structure helps to hold water during low flow periods at elevation 68.5 to 70. If the structure was not in place, the basin would essentially dry up when the Mississippi River falls to low stages in late summer and fall. Here are some facts about the little sunflower structure. This structure works in tandem with the Steel Bayou structure to remove floodwaters from the Yazoo backwater area. Here are some facts about the Muddy Bayou structure, which was constructed as a mitigation feature for the Yazoo backwater and Satartia levees. It is managed by the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks to improve the fishery resources in Eagle Lake during non-flood times. However, the Vicksburg District manages the structure during flood events. Some of the current concerns in the Yazoo backwater area is highly dependent on the amount of precipitation falling over the drainage area of the Mississippi River, and also the amount of precipitation falling in the 4,093 square mile drainage area in the Yazoo backwater area. In 2019, rainfall was heavy over both the Mississippi River and Sunflower watersheds, causing a long record flood in the backwater area. However, in 2011, when we had record flooding on the Mississippi River and set new stages that haven't been seen since 1927, the area inside the Yazoo backwater area was experiencing a near record drought, thereby not having any significant flooding since the water level only got to approximately 90 feet. This slide shows some of the changes from the 2007 report. While the size of the pump and the on-off elevation remains the same, the location has moved to near Deer Creek. This will allow floodwaters to be pumped sooner over the Yazoo backwater levee, since this is the larger of the two sump areas. The acreage included in the non-structural feature has gone down significantly from what was recommended in the 2007 report. This is due to the fact that a large amount of acreage has been reforested under USDA and other NGO programs. Mitigation has seen a reduction due to the impacts on wetlands. The new studies show precipitation to be the driving force on wetlands. The district stated in the 2007 report that precipitation played a large role in wetland hydrology, but no data existed to document this approach. However, in the ensuing years, data was collected that showed 87% of the wetlands are being sustained by precipitation. In addition, supplemental low-flow groundwater wells will help to offset aquatic, mussel, and other invertebrate impacts. This slide shows the location of the constructed and proposed features for the Yazoo Backwater project. This slide shows some of the new data that was utilized in updating this report. Please remember, you can submit your comments any of the three methods shown here. We will put this slide up again after Ms. Sarah Timms discusses the NEPA process. Thank you.
All right, so we'll move into one more presentation from Ms. Sarah Timms.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Timms, and I am the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA Coordinator for the Draft Supplement Number 2 to the 1982 Yazoo Area Pump Project Final Environmental Impact Statement. I appreciate everyone's participation and can assure you that any input we get from you will be of value to us. Now for a brief background on NEPA. The National Environmental Policy Act was signed into law on January 1, 1970. NEPA requires federal agencies to incorporate environmental considerations in their planning and decision-making through a systematic interdisciplinary approach. Specifically, all federal agencies are to prepare detailed statements assessing the environmental impact of and alternatives to major federal actions significantly affecting the environment. These statements are commonly referred to as environmental assessments or environmental impact statements. NEPA also requires that environmental information be made available to the public. Since this project is considered a major federal action that significantly affects the quality of the human environment, we have prepared a supplemental environmental impact statement for review and comment. we are holding this public meeting to discuss the findings of the draft supplement number 2 to the 1982 Yazoo Area Pump Project Final Environmental Impact Statement, and the Vicksburg District is soliciting your comments on the proposed plan. The notice of availability for the draft supplement number 2 was published in the Federal Register on October 16th, and the draft supplement number 2 and associated appendices is available on our project website. The link to this website is on our closing slide. The comment period for the draft supplement number 2 is open through November 30th. The Yazoo Basin, Yazoo Backwater, Mississippi project was authorized by the Flood Control Act of 1941. This draft supplement number 2 will focus on the remaining authorized yet unconstructed flood damage reduction features, specifically the pump station of the Yazoo Basin, Yazoo Backwater project. The purpose of the draft supplement number 2 is to reevaluate the recommended plan from the 2007 main report based on an updated period of record, improved digital elevation models, and improved environmental and hydraulic data, analysis, and documentation. The Yazoo area continues to experience periodic, damaging backwater floods and has experienced flooding in 9 out of the last 10 years. The project is needed to reduce flood impacts and restore balance to the ecosystem. This graphic shows the Yazoo study area, which contains approximately 926,000 acres and includes all or portions of Humphreys, Issaquena, Sharkey, Warren, Washington, and Yazoo counties in Mississippi, and part of Madison Parish, Louisiana. The draft supplement number 2 does not reformulate the project. Instead, it reevaluates the recommended plan from the 2007 main report based on updated information as previously stated. Therefore, only 2 alternatives were evaluated. Alternative 1, the no action alternative, and Alternative 2, the proposed plan. The proposed plan consists of structural, non-structural, and mitigation features. The structural feature includes a 14,000 cubic foot per second pump station consisting of 12 pumps located near Deer Creek with a year-round pump-on elevation of 87 feet when the riverside water elevation is greater than the landside water elevation at the Still Bayou water control structure. The non-structural feature includes acquisition and reforestation or conservation features on up to 2,700 acres of agricultural lands through perpetual easements from willing sellers only. The mitigation feature includes the acquisition of 2,405 acres of frequently flooded agricultural lands in fee title and subsequent reforestation of these lands to offset unavoidable losses to wetland, terrestrial, aquatic, and waterfowl resources. The mitigation feature also includes the installation of 34 supplemental low-flow groundwater wells to mitigate for additional unavoidable losses to aquatic resources. This graphic shows the authorized and completed features of the Yazoo Basin, Yazoo Backwater project within the Yazoo study area. The completed features include the Little Sunflower water control structure, the Still Bayou water control structure, and the Muddy Bayou water control structure, each labeled and denoted with a yellow star. The blue line shows the diversion channel that connects the Little Sunflower and Still Bayou water control structures. The diversion channel follows part of the Yazoo Backwater levee, which is shown as a thin green line. The green X shows the original location of the pump station, which was located near the Steel Bayou water control structure. The red X shows the new location of the pump station, which is near Deer Creek. On this graphic, the red outline shows the approximate 926,000 acre Yazoo study area footprint. The proposed Deer Creek pump station location is identified by the blue star, and the yellow star is the location of the proposed borrow area. This graphic shows the locations of the 34 supplemental low-flow groundwater wells located north of the Yazoo study area. The significant resources identified during scoping and analyzed in the draft supplement number 2 are shown here. Socioeconomic resources, environmental justice, prime and unique farmland, cultural resources, recreation, aesthetics, noise, air quality, hazardous, toxic, and radioactive waste, hydraulics and hydrology, wetlands, waterfowl, terrestrial habitat, wildlife, threatened and endangered species, Migratory Bird Treaty Act, Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, aquatic resources and fisheries, and water quality. The items in bold include those quantitative assessments conducted to determine compensatory mitigation requirements using ecological models that were certified or approved by the Ecosystem Restoration National Planning Center of Expertise in accordance with core policy. Due to the nature of the project, we have initiated the development of a programmatic agreement that would govern the Section 106 review process for cultural resources. The consulting parties include 7 federally recognized tribes, the Mississippi State Historic Preservation Office, and the Mississippi Levee Board. The Louisiana State Historic Preservation Office withdrew from consultation, stating their office determined the project will have no effects on historic properties in Louisiana. Section 7 consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service pursuant to the Endangered Species Act is currently ongoing. A farmland conversion impact rating form has been coordinated with the Natural Resources Conservation Service for the project footprint. Additionally, a 401 water quality certification and site assessment for hazardous, toxic, and radioactive waste would be obtained and completed after congressional appropriations are received and while detailed engineering and construction plans are being developed. Our colleagues at the U.S. Corps of Engineers Engineer Research and Development Center conducted quantitative assessments for unavoidable wetland, terrestrial, waterfowl, and aquatic impacts associated with the construction and operation of the proposed plan. The wetland assessment utilized the regional guidebook for applying the hydrogeomorphic approach to assessing functions of forested wetlands in the Mississippi Alluvial Valley, also known as the HGM Manual. Impacts and benefits to the terrestrial environment were quantified using the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's habitat evaluation procedures, utilizing 6 different habitat suitability index models of various wildlife species. The waterfowl assessment utilized the manual for calculating duck use days in the Mississippi Alluvial Valley and was developed by Dr. Mickey Heitmeyer. And finally, the aquatic assessment was conducted using the EnviroFish manual. This slide summarizes the results of the wetland, waterfowl, terrestrial, and aquatic assessments. To compensate for unavoidable losses to these environmental resources from the construction and operation of the proposed plan, compensatory mitigation requirements were calculated based on impacts from the entire calendar year, various flood frequencies, and variable flood depths. Based on these calculations, it was determined that the acquisition of 2,405 acres of frequently flooded agricultural lands in fee title and subsequent reforestation of these lands will be pursued to offset any unavoidable losses to wetland, waterfowl, terrestrial, and aquatic resources. The non-structural flood damage feature, or reforestation, will provide substantial environmental benefits to all resource categories, but were not included in the calculation of the 2,405-acre compensatory mitigation effort. Therefore, the anticipatory ecological benefits from the non-structural feature will be in addition to those benefits resulting from the compensatory mitigation effort. Additional compensatory mitigation will be accomplished through the installation of 34 supplemental low-flow groundwater wells. The supplemental low-flow groundwater wells will improve environmental flows in 9,321 acres of streams, directly benefiting fish, mussels, and other ecological attributes of the Yazoo study area. Monitoring studies have documented extensive hypoxia in the Yazoo study area during flood inundation, questioning the value of reforestation to fully address aquatic impacts. Therefore, the additional mitigation method of the installation of supplemental low-flow groundwater wells will address a range of other habitat impairments in the Big Sunflower Still Bayou drainage. The wells are expected to improve overall fish communities and aquatic habitat through improved environmental flows during the low-flow water season. Reestablishing perennial flows with supplemental low-flow groundwater wells is anticipated to offset high mortality of larvae and juvenile fish in the spring from hypoxia, and improve survival of juveniles and adults during autumn. This approach addresses the overall aquatic community during all life stages and improves a total of 9,321 acres of streams by improved environmental flows. A cooperating agency meeting with the 6 cooperating agencies was held on May 19th. The 6 cooperating agencies are the Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Forest Service, Natural Resources Conservation Service, Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, and Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. The notice of availability was published, and the draft supplement number 2 to the 1982 Yazoo Area Pump Project Final Environmental Impact Statement was released for public and agency review on October 16th, which is also the date the public comment period began. The public meeting is being held today, November the 10th. The public comment period ends on November 30th. If you would like to submit a comment on the draft supplement number 2 to the 1982 Yazoo Area Pump Project Final Environmental Impact Statement, you can do so by sending an email, by mail, or by calling or text with the associated details for each shown. Please remember that the closing date for submitting comments is November 30th. If you would like a copy of the draft supplement number 2 to the 1982 Yazoo Area Pump Project Final Environmental Impact Statement and associated appendices, please visit the project website shown at the bottom of the screen. Again, please remember the closing date for submitting comments on the draft supplement number 2 is November 30th. Thank you for participating today, and we look forward to hearing from you.
All right. So thank you for your attention as we went through those 3 quick videos to hopefully give you a better overview. If you haven't had a chance to look at the document, those are the highlights of that. We encourage you to go to the website, as Sarah mentioned, and get that document and read it for yourselves. And again, seek to understand the science and the engineering wrapped up in that great document. So at this time, we're going to begin the question and answer portion, the main portion of why we're here tonight. So with me in person tonight, to help answer your questions, we have several experts on this project, and so not on screen, but available to answer questions is the Senior Project Manager, Ken Parrish. And to my left, we have, who you just heard, the NEPA Manager, Ms. Sarah Timms. And to my right, your left, is Mr. Drew Smith, our Water Management Section Chief here at the Vicksburg District. Next to him, we have Mr. Brandon Griffin. And he is our Architectural, Civil, and Mechanical Engineer Section Chief here at the district as well. We also have with us tonight from the Engineer Research and Development Center 2 very key people who are involved in this project. We have Dr. Jack Kilgore, who is a research and fisheries biologist from the Environmental Lab at ERDIC, as well as Dr. Jacob Berkowitz, a social scientist and from the Environmental Lab also at ERDIC. Gentlemen, we thank you for being here with us tonight as well. And so we have this multidisciplinary team of experts with us tonight from both our district, also from the New Orleans district, who has helped with this, and the Engineer Research and Development Center to capture and address your comments. And so as a reminder, there are 3 different ways we've got questions coming in tonight. One is through email at yazoobackwater@usace.army.mil. The second is voicemail or text message to 601-392-2237. Or if you're logged on and watching us on Facebook Live, you can go directly there into that live stream and leave your comments there. So every question, we'll answer as many as we can in the time we have allotted, but just realize they're coming from multiple. You may not see all the questions that come in, and we're trying, as they come in, we're lining them up to get them answered. So without further ado, we're going to move into question and answers. I've got the questions coming in as they get collated to me, and I'll start distributing those out to get answered. So with that, let's go to our first question. And so the first question is, why did the reforestation component of the project drop from 55,600 acres to 2,700 acres? And so for this one, I think we'll go to the Senior Project Manager, Ken Parrish.
Thank you, Colonel. Basically, this reforestation component was part of the non-structural feature in the 2007 report. Basically, there was a split between the structural and the non-structural at elevation 87. So those people that had land above elevation 87 got pump benefits. Those people that had agricultural lands below elevation 87 were offered a willing seller easement on these 55,600 acres. Basically, since that time, we've had WRP has reforested a lot of land up there, along with a lot of the NGO organizations. So now there's not 2,700 acres below elevation 87 to acquire for this non-structural component.
All right, thank you, Ken. Our next question. For our concerned friends and neighbors in Mississippi and Louisiana who are south of the pumps, would you please explain the effects on the Mississippi River of the 14,000 CFS pumps? I think this is best goes to our hydraulics chief, Drew Smith.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you. I think it's important to note with the pump station and the Mississippi River and its impacts to note where those levels are. And so at a pump on elevation of 87 feet in the interior area, the Mississippi River would have to be in excess of 87 feet on the outside of there. So that puts the Mississippi River around 40 feet or higher meaning there's more than 1 million CFS already in the Mississippi River. So with that kind of volume of water, you've got heavy flooding or a lot of water impounded on the Yazoo River, which is the riverside of Steel Bayou. And so discharging 14,000 CFS into that large volume of water, including the 1 million CFS going down the Mississippi River already or higher, 14,000 CFS really doesn't make a large impact on that volume of water. We're looking at somewhere around 1/4 of a foot is what our numerical model suggests. We might see impacts right there on the riverside of the pump station, and then significantly lower than that, probably half of that at the actual Vicksburg gauge. It would be almost immeasurable in terms of the amount of water going on the river to what that pump impact would be.
And you said almost immeasurable. You could not.
Correct.
Great. All right, our next question. How will the pumps benefit the Eagle Lake community? So Drew, you want to answer that one as well?
I will, sir. The impact of the pump at the Eagle Lake area will be similar to what it'll be for the rest of the backwater area. This is a major flood control improvement for the area. It will provide access. The access won't be very likely that it'll be cut off as it is now due to floodwaters on the interior. So that Highway 465 that goes underwater, the likelihood of that occurring with the pump in place will be significantly lower. The likelihood of water in homes in that area, similar to how we saw in 2019, will be significantly lower. We'll have a shorter duration flooding on agricultural land around Eagle Lake, as well as the rest of the Yazoo backwater area. And then the likelihood of the actual lake flooding due to backwater flooding will be very unlikely as well. So just a overall drop and improvement in flood control.
Okay, thanks, Drew. So the next question. What will the low flow supplementary wells do to help the environment? Dr. Kilgore, would you like to take a look at that one?
One of the major impediments that we see in the big sunflower still is the lack of environmental flows, or essentially.
If you will, Doctor, if you'll move a little closer to the mic so that people out on Facebook can hear you. Thank you.
One of the primary impediments we have in the big sunflower basin is the low flows during the late summer and autumn. The flows have been impacted over the years from a normal 150 CFS to essentially 0. And when these flows go from a perennial to an intermittent flow, you have multiple impacts. One is that the survival of juvenile and adult fish diminish greatly. And so what happens is that when you have the hypoxia during the spring due to prolonged inundation, and by hypoxia I mean the very low DOs that occur in the sump area, the Yazoo project area, you have high mortality as a result of that. And then this is followed by extreme low flows, and together what this does is impact all life stages of fish and other aquatic organisms. So the supplemental low flows will actually increase survival, offset some of the mortality associated with the
Much better. There you go.
Okay.
Even better.
Should I start over again?
No, I say just continue on.
Okay. And so essentially what it does is it offsets mortality during the spring due to hypoxia. It increases survival. And so what we're doing is we're looking at a watershed type analysis and considering all life stages of fish. And we feel that this increased flow during the late summer and fall will have a tremendous benefit on the aquatic assemblages that occur in this watershed.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kilgore. All right, our next question. What is the advantage of switching the pumps from diesel to natural gas? And so I think we'll go to our engineering construction section, Mr. Brandon Griffin on this one.
So there are several advantages. One is the fuel cost. Currently, natural gas is approximately 40% lower, cheaper than diesel. The second is it eliminates fuel storage tanks, fuel docks, and containment facilities, as well as it reduces the risk of fuel spills.
All right. Thank you. Next question. Some groups have repeatedly said that this project will destroy over 200,000 acres of wetlands. Will any wetlands be destroyed by this project? I think, Sarah, you want to take this one?
Thank you. No, the project would reduce the maximum depth and duration of flooding, thereby providing numerous benefits to wildlife. Flooding is a stressor to wildlife, destroying their food sources and forcing them to abandon their habitats in search of areas that have not been flooded. After the 2019 flood, the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks found more than 8,000 deer carcasses in the impacted area. Beyond its ability to reduce devastating flooding, the project will include mitigation features that will improve conditions for wildlife. The structural component of the project will impact environmental resources as will the hydrologic changes from the operation of the pump. However, these impacts were minimized, reduced, and avoided to the maximum extent practicable, and those unavoided impacts will be mitigated. The project will compensate these losses through compensatory mitigation, which will offset any unavoidable losses to wetlands, terrestrials, waterfowl, and aquatic resources. Additionally, the non-structural flood damage feature, the reforestation of the 2,700 acres, will provide substantial environmental benefits to all resource categories. But these benefits were not included in the calculation of the compensatory mitigation requirements.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah, for that answer. I think so we'll go on to our next question. What's the elevation difference from the original pump location and the new pump location, which we've seen a couple of times in the slideshows? We talked about the old location, and then we showed the new location for the pump. So, Drew, you want to take this one on? Talk about the pump elevations.
Yes, sir, no problem. So so in terms of water surface, that's really what we're focused on here is when we have the conditions such that the pumps would be operational at 87 feet. There will be a slight water surface slope from the old location of Steel Bow up to Deer Creek. As these stages on the interior rise, that pool becomes relatively flat, meaning the water surface elevation at Steel Bow will be very similar to the water surface up at the Deer Creek location. So there'll be very little change to that elevation, especially as its interior stages rise.
Okay, thanks, Drew. I got a little ahead of myself there, but I did want to make one addition, one comment. We talked about this last question. Sarah talked about, the question was, someone said the project will destroy over 200 acres of wetlands, and the question was, will any wetlands be destroyed by the project? And we said a couple of times, both in the videos as well as in the slide presentations, that the operation of the pumps will not convert any wetlands to non-wetlands. And that's what the new analysis shows. So I think as we think about, the destruction of wetlands, that's an important piece of that, is that the operation of the pumps won't convert any wetlands to non-wetlands. All right, let's go on to our next question. kind of a long question here, so I'll work through it. Hundreds of thousands of trees were killed during the 2019 and 2020 backwater floods. Over 50,000 acres in the project area have been reforested in oak species preferred for wildlife habitat and removal of atmospheric carbon. Repeated floods of long duration will kill these trees planted with taxpayer-funded through government programs along with the hardwood species in the natural forest. Question: do any of the recommended alternatives prevent the loss of these preferred species from repetitive flooding? So let's go. Sarah, you want to take that one on as well?
The pumps would decrease the duration of flooding that induces tree mortality.
Turn that one off. I'll tell you what. We'll share. There you go.
So the pumps. Is that close enough? The pumps would decrease the long duration of the flooding that induces tree mortality in portions of the project area. During the past 2 years, some areas of the backwater area were inundated for sufficient duration, which induced heavy tree mortality. The proposed plan is designed in part to significantly reduce the depth and duration of these inundation events above 87 feet elevation, which will reduce the likelihood of tree mortality.
All right, thanks, Sarah. All right. We can and will adapt as we go through this. So I appreciate everyone out there. First, for your patience as we go through this. Obviously, this is new for us, as it is for you. And so I just want to remind those that may have tuned in late that this is the virtual public meeting for the draft supplement number 2 to the 1982 Yazoo area pump project. Final environmental impact statement. So if you tuned in late, you can reach us in a couple of different ways and get your comments to us, really in 3 ways. First, if you log into Facebook, and you probably are if you're watching this, you can put them right there in the chat box, and we'll get those over in the queue. You can also send them to Yazoo Backwater at USACE.army.mil, and you can also send them in via voice or text to 601-392-2237. So we continue to go through the comments that we already have and the questions that we already have. So we'll get back to that. But again, please keep sending in those questions and comments. And speaking of adaptive management, here's a question: what is the advantage of adaptive management? And if you've looked at the report or you paid close attention to the slides, we talked about an adaptive management plan for this project. And so here's a question: what is an adaptive management plan? So we'll send that back to Kent, and then if anyone wants to add on to that, please feel free to.
Yes, adaptive management ensures that the estimated environmental impacts associated with this project are effectively captured during the post-project implementation conditions. The monitored and adaptive management plan allows the Corps to make adjustments related to pump operations, supplemental low-flow groundwater wells, and the surface water contributions from the Little Sunflower Gate. The adaptive management plan improves the environmental flows important to sustaining fish, mussels, and aquatic microinvertebrates by increasing the flow through the Big Sunflower with the wells. Important water quality conditions, especially dissolved oxygen, will be improved, thus reducing hypoxia.
Okay, any others that want to talk a little bit about that?
I might add that, there's always a degree of uncertainty
when we're doing ecological type mitigation. And so the monitoring is an important part of that adaptive management. But the monitoring informs how successful we are. And if we find that we do need to make adjustments, then the adaptive management plan is flexible enough to allow us to go in and make those adjustments to improve the mitigation.
Yeah, and so, I mean, clearly that's a key part of the plan, the ability to adjust based on conditions. And so, you know, that's why you'll see it again and again as a key component. Right, so next question. How much timber has died or been compromised from excess flooding? And I would say, number one, that is a good question. I don't know that we have completely accurate data on that as of yet, and I think, you know, that clearly deserves a further investigation. We will add that comment to the record and address that, but I think you're absolutely right. That's something that needs some more data and some more study. And so thank you for sending in that question. Next question. How will pumping help fish and wildlife? So I think we'll go back to Dr. Kilgore on fish and wildlife.
Yes, I can certainly speak to the fish and the aquatics. I go back to the hypoxia. So when the structure is closed and the water backs up, the water becomes stratified, and so you only really have dissolved oxygen that can sustain aquatic life in the upper 5 to 10 feet of water. We have calculated that maybe up to 50 to 65% of the water volume has dissolved oxygen less than 2 milligrams per liter, and fish and most aquatic animals need at least 3 to 5. And so what the pumping does is it expedites the opening of the Steel Bayou structure. And hypoxia is a natural process in any backwater lakes, you know, in the Mississippi River floodplain, for example. But the difference in this project is that there's nowhere for the fish to escape because the structure is closed, and they either have to survive or move 60 miles upstream, and even then the dissolved oxygen is also very low during the spring. So we think that the pumping will actually increase the opportunity for fish to move about. Dissolved oxygen will increase just through the advection of that water moving through the Steel Bayou structure. So that's one of the primary benefits of the pumps, is to expedite the opening of the Steel Bayou structure.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kilgore. All right. Our next question. Bear with me. Okay. Next question is, would the new Yazoo pumps location allow the Corps to operate the pumps when the Steel Bayou gates are open? If so, has the Corps assessed the potential impacts of such an operation? I mean, this is, I think, for hydraulics. So, Drew, you want to take that one?
Yes, sir. The fact is that Steel Bayou's capacity.
Yeah, you know, check it real quick.
Technical difficulties. The fact is that Steel Bayou's drainage capacity, being that it's a gravity-fed gate, is essentially surpasses the pump capacity with very little head on it. So about a little over a half a foot of head. So when we're in a condition that we can open Steel Bayou, usually the river is falling at such a pace that we're gonna exceed the pump capacity very quickly within a day or so of opening Steel Bayou, and the need to pump while Steel Bayou was open would not be there. We have looked at that. Some of the pump information that we've looked at from vendors in the past has said that would be possible, but there'd be a lot of risk to the actual infrastructure itself. But Steel Bayou's capacity is why we wouldn't pump and gravity feed at the same time.
Okay, thanks, Drew. So the next question is a question that comes up quite a bit, and question is, how long will it take to finish the work? And so that really is an engineering question. That comes up a lot. And I think I'll hand it to Brandon in just a second. But one thing I will say is that, you know, when you talk about components like this, they are not readily on the shelf, right? These things are specially designed. These types of stations specially made and constructed. So, Brandon, you want to take a whack at this one?
Yes. So once authorized and funded is appropriated, and the district has funds, we estimate that it will take several years to complete the design and construction of the structural and non-structural components of the project.
Yeah, and I know that this came up as well in a public meeting back in January as well. I would say several years, and I think that shocks people. I mean, there's a lot of there would be, if we got to that point, a lot of parallel efforts going on. You know, the design that was done previously is now really out of date and with a new location. So we're looking at design and construction, and again, not readily available, not off the shelf. These have to be specially designed, specially made. And so from a realistic standpoint, several years between design and construction. All right, next question. Some groups have claimed that the pumps will dry up the delta. How many acres will be flooded before the pumps are turned on at 87 feet? This is really another hydraulics question. I think, Drew, you want to take this?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. New terrain or elevation data that we've gathered over the past several years, improvements in technology have allowed us to more accurately calculate that number. And we're looking at about 125,000 acres would be inundated at that 87-foot elevation when the pumps would cut on.
Yeah, and so Drew, you mentioned something important there as well. You know, what's different this time around on the analysis, and it is we've got better elevation data to show us the ground, what the ground actually looks like, and we have just better modeling. We've talked about that. I've talked about this in several meetings with several coordinating agencies. The ability to work with the Hydraulic Engineer Center out of Davis, California, and develop new models that we have I want to talk about a fundamentally better understanding there. That's part of that calculation and computation, is that we can see it better when we have inputs to the system. Absolutely. So, next question. You stated the impacts of the pump are immeasurable. I think someone's referring back to an earlier question that we had. You stated the impacts of the pumps are, quote, immeasurable, but the Corps study actually shows that flood levels in the Yazoo River could have increased by 0.3 feet to 0.8 feet in 2019 had the Yazoo pumps been in operation. Isn't there a risk that increase would overtop the Yazoo backwater levee? So I'll hit that again for the folks out there. Isn't there a risk that increase would overtop the Yazoo backwater levee? Drew.
Right, yeah, good question. Kind of reverting back to the one we had before with the downstream impacts. I think the document that the question is referring to is the impacts of Yazoo backwater pump to downstream stages, dated 22 of November 2019. The analysis from our numerical model actually showed a 0.2 to 0.3 foot increase on the river side of the pump station right there, adjacent to the levee in the Yazoo River. Those impacts diminish as you move further toward the actual Mississippi River. So at the mouth of the Yazoo, we're looking at around 0.2, and at the Vicksburg gauge, anywhere from 0.1 to 0.2 feet. So we're talking several inches. Like I said, when there's more than 1 million CFS going down the river, our margin of error for measuring the actual stage increases, and we likely wouldn't be able to measure that increase while the pumps were on. In reference to the Yazoo backwater levee, it's important to note that when the pumps are fully operational, that means that we have an increasing stage on both the inside and the outside, above 90 feet most likely. Your volume of water on both sides is drastically higher, and the impact of the pump actually diminishes on the river side of the Yazoo, or on the Yazoo River, or the river side of the pump station. As that volume increases, it takes that 14,000 CFS impact actually diminishes. And so I'm not sure where the 0.8 feet per feet number came from, but it's really 0.2, 0.3. And the likelihood of overtopping the backwater levee due to the pumps is very, very, very minor, very minimal.
All right, thank you, Drew. A lot of hydraulics type questions in this thread. So our next question, you just said the pumps will reduce flood levels around Eagle Lake. However, the maps you include in this draft SEIS show no reductions in flood levels at Eagle Lake. Can you explain that further, please?
Yes, I think it's important to note there, those are 2D maps. Those are showing actual flood extents. There's obviously a margin of error in there. We're modeling 500,000 acres. So there's some fine details in there. The most important thing to note is that the 100-year, as stated in the report, 100-year elevation in the backwater area with the pumps would drop from about 100.2 or 3 to about 95.6 or 7. And so we're talking about a 4.5 to 5 foot drop in that 100-year elevation. That's the key. The maps are a 2D layer with some error involved. There will be drastic improvements in flood control at Eagle Lake.
And so, given that line of questions, Drew, I think it might be a good time to talk a little bit about the Yazoo River Basin in general for the audience and what that entails and some of the characteristics of that. So I think it will be helpful if you'll take a little bit of time and kind of walk us through the Yazoo River Basin in general.
Yes, sir, no problem. So the Yazoo River Basin is unique in that its ability to really fight two types of floods. The type of flood we're talking about here is a backwater flood due to increased stages on the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River actually inundating the lower part of the Yazoo River due to high stages. That's when the ability to gravity feed out of the backwater area that we're talking about would diminish, and we would need to mechanically move that water over the levee with a pump. The Yazoo Basin also has immense flood control features for headwater flooding as well. As Kent stated in his video, the Yazoo Basin encompasses 13,000 to 14,000 acres. And so we're really preventing delta flooding with the backwater system that we're talking about today, and then with headwater levees and large reservoirs in North Mississippi with Arcabella, Sardis, Enid, and Grenada that provide a ton of flood control benefit to the delta by cutting off and storing and controlling a lot of that headwater flooding that comes out of the North Mississippi hills due to heavy rains, and then also the South Delta with backwater flooding.
And so what I'm hearing is it's part of a larger system.
Correct.
And so when we talk about a little bit on the Yazoo Backwater project in general, can you talk about it from a systems perspective of the components? We saw in Kent's briefing earlier that components, right, the existing components and then the proposed components. Can you talk about that, the system, what's there, how it's supposed to operate a little more?
Yes, sir. So the backwater feature of the system includes the levee with the two drainage structures. Those are a part of the larger MR&T system that was authorized in the 1928 Flood Control Act that protect all of the adjacent lands to the Mississippi River to protect them from flooding from the Mississippi River. And as you move up the Yazoo River, you swap to that more headwater flooding. We have many hundreds of miles of levees along the Yazoo River. We have control structures that allow closure to prevent high stages on the Yazoo River, similar to the Mississippi River, prevent stages on the Yazoo from backing into adjacent lands, and then we can let interior drainage out. Then we move up the Tallahatchie River, similar deal there. We've got levees and drainage structures. We've got channel improvement projects that go up through there with with our UIP project. That we're improving our channel efficiency up through there, improving our capacity for releasing water out of our reservoirs. And then really the crux of the system is those large flood control reservoirs in North Mississippi that are able to store a tremendous amount of flood runoff with tremendous benefits for downstream areas that include nearly all of the delta. And so those prevent large floods from coming out of the hills, jumping out of the Tallahatchie and Coldwater River and Yazoo River over into the South Delta and inundating the South Delta from the north, and also protecting the South Delta from the south with the backwater levee and structures.
All right, thanks, Drew. And so I just think that's an important point, that it's part of a system. These features are not necessarily standalone features, and when they stand alone or there's a piece missing, they don't operate as designed or intended. And so with that, you have unintended consequences. So I'll take us back to the questions, and here's a related question to that. We kind of hit this previously, but we do want to hit it since it came in to us. What will the flood level be in the backwater before the pumps kick in and start draining? Yeah, go ahead, Drew.
Yes, sir. That's the interior elevation where the pumps would actually start pumping is 87 feet. It's also important to note that that does not mean the full pump station is operational. The pumps will be staged on as stages increase and as needed, as we operate all of our pump stations in the Vicksburg District.
And again, that goes back to adapting in many ways. Okay, next question. I think we're going to stay a little bit longer in hydraulics. And this, I think we've talked a little bit about this one as well. But why has the Corps disregarded the increased risk of flooding downstream communities and overtopping the Yazoo backwater levee?
Yes, sir. So back to the previous answers of the 14,000 CFS added to the riverside of the backwater levee and to the Mississippi River downstream will be insignificant in terms of water levels and what you actually see on the ground. Numerical models are showing a couple of tenths on the Yazoo River and at Vicksburg. That is well within the margin of error in those models. We truly feel on the ground with the pumps operational that there wouldn't be any difference, real noticeable difference in the water levels. And I'd also, for more details on that, I'd refer you to the impacts of the Yazoo backwater pump to downstream stages documented on the district website.
Okay, thanks, Drew. Our next question. Can you explain why the data shows that can you explain why the data shows that wetland impacts are so much less in this report than in 2007? And so I think for wetland impacts, if we can go to Dr. Berkowitz, do you want to take that one on?
Yes, sir. So thank you for the question. The decrease in wetland acreages in the most recent report results from two factors. The first of which is a more comprehensive hydrologic period of record that was used in the updated modeling. The second is a highly improved digital elevation model, or DEM. In particular, the improvements in elevation mapping have led us to use a 10-meter resolution DEM, whereas the previous study utilized a 30-meter digital elevation model. And these improvements helped us to identify ridges and other high elevation features within the study area that previously we could not detect. So that in part decreased the estimated acreage of wetlands within the project area. Additionally, the application of a new and more complete period of record spanning the time of 1978 to 2011 further reduced the estimated extent of wetlands. The decrease resulting from this new period of record is related to the completion of several large flood control features within the study area, including the Holly Bluff Cutoff, which was completed in 1958, and the Yazoo Backwater Levee, which was completed in 1978. Collectively, these flood control features have reduced the stages in the study area by approximately 1 to 3 feet. The implementation of these features translates into a large aerial decrease in potential wetland areas.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Berkowitz. So let's stay a little bit on wetland impacts and on aquatic. So what measures are being done to protect the fish when pumps are running so you don't have fish kill? So let me go back through that one. What measures are being done to protect the fish when pumps are running so that you don't have fish kill? And Dr. Kilgore, you want to take that one on?
Yes, sir. Well, what we're talking about is entrainment and impingement. There's several factors involved, but one of the things we did in the evaluation of this project last year and this year was we actually sampled the outflow of steel value to document the young of year fish that exist, that are coming out of the backwater area. And 99% of those fish were gizzard shad and threadfin shad. And if you know your fish, you know that those two species are very ubiquitous throughout really the Mississippi River Valley. We did not collect any endangered or threatened species. But that's not to say that it's not possible for fish to become entrained and impinged. I believe it'll have trash racks that are about, what is it, Drew, about 5 or 6 inches spaced. So the trash racks will keep the larger fish from being entrained into the pump. The smaller fish may become entrained. Numerous studies in power plant entrainment has shown that entrainment and impingement mortality is extremely low, usually less than 5%. Some of your fish have what we call these burst swimming speeds, and they can avoid being entrained. They'll swim away from it. Those that are entrained could be impinged by the impellers, and that creates potential mortality. But by all accounts, it looks like that, number one, they're mostly the ubiquitous shad. Also, the water will be pumped from the bottom of the connecting channel. And as I mentioned previously, that the hypoxia prevents a lot of fish from occurring along the bottom. So we don't really expect a lot of fish to actually be in the vicinity of the pump intake. So overall, we think that entrainment and impingement will be negligible.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kilgore. And this may be one for you as well. We'll see. Next question. Can you explain the choice for using mallard as the only waterfowl species included in the DUD calculation? That's duck use days. The Yazoo backwater is relatively more important for other waterfowl species, especially greater white-fronted geese. So the question was, can you explain the choice for using mallard as the only waterfowl species? Any thoughts from the panel on that one? Is that one we would need to? Okay, so, yeah.
Colonel, I do think we have some information on that one. That has come in from the technical team.
Okay. Yeah, so we have, you want me to hit it?
I can.
Yeah, give us in.
So while the waterfowl analysis incorporated values that did focus on mallard, that analysis represents a number of species, waterfowl species, that rely on the areas within that could be affected by the project. Many species of dabbling ducks rely on the same food resources and agricultural grain fields as mallard ducks do. Therefore, the mallard serves as a representative species in which to evaluate the loss of foraging habitat, as well as some of the same criteria used to determine suitable mitigation for impacts to waterfowl more broadly. Smaller ducks, such as blue-winged and green-winged teal, are more likely to feed in shallower waters of a foot or less Therefore, selection of mallard, which often feeds at depths up to 18 inches, was selected to encompass other dabbling duck species. These differ in that these species generally graze on grass and harvested grain in unflooding conditions more than when the land is flooded. Most of the agricultural areas that could be impacted within the Yazoo Basin are typically planted in soybeans or cotton. Greater white-fronted geese will feed on the vegetation of aquatic plants in more open water environments, but in general, impacts from the pump operation would be limited to geese overall. Ultimately, the objective of the study was to assess the value of habitat being lost as sustainable foraging habitat to waterfowl, rather than being directed at various species of waterfowl. USACE believes that the current analysis sufficiently addresses waterfowl foraging habitat loss and associated required mitigation to offset those losses. Thank you for your question.
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Berkowitz, for walking us through that. And so if that seems a little strange to those out there, the bottom line is, you know, in this environment, we can only get so many people here, and there's so many more people that have worked on this project. So I believe we said I was from the terrestrial working group and Dr. Fisher. So as these questions come in, we have people, experts out there replying to your questions and then getting that answer back to us. So in some ways, this medium helps answer more questions because we can get those out, you know, early to the experts, and they can provide an answer back that then we can get to you through here. So that's what's kind of going on behind the scenes. The questions are going out, the experts are answering them, or unless we have the expert here who helps answer them as well. So thank you, terrestrial team, as well. We'll move on to our next question. We get this question a good bit, and so I'll take it on. Now, how much would the pumps cost? You know, that comes up a lot. And the bottom line is we're working on it, right? That's on the to-do list. We've certainly, looking at cost savings, and the engineering branch have come together and done deep dives on what is necessary for the project. But the focus of this report is on environmental impacts. And that was what we were asked to do, and that's what we focused on in this environmental impact statement. And so the answer to the question is, we owe that. We know that at some point in the future, if we get to that point, there's a budgeting process that cost has got to go into. And so we will file that question away. We will address that throughout this process, and we're coming to that. It's kind of a long way around to that answer. The next question. Table 8, this is a very specific question. Table 85 of the wetland appendix on page 106 says the acres that shift flood duration under the action alternative make a change from 67,000 acres in 2007 to 38,774 under the action alternative. How many of those 38,774 acres can be converted to farmland and be reliably farmed in most years? Does the NRCS farmland conversion impact rating cover this? And we don't have anything coming back from the expert team. And so this is one of these where we're going to have to hold and do a little more digging on that to provide that the answer that it needs. And so we're going to add that one to our list to address during this comment period. Very specific question, deserves a specific answer, so thank you for that question. And again, we'll definitely address that. Next question, how will the warm, fresh water being pumped into the Mississippi River and reaching the Gulf of Mexico affect the saltwater content in the Gulf? Will this affect ecological resources and aquacultural industries such as oyster farming, and that bring many benefits to the state of Mississippi? And this is a hydrology question. I'm gonna hand it to Drew. You know, I'll say, obviously, this is prescient, it's been in the news. We talked earlier about how much water flows down the Mississippi River, and that depends on which year. And certainly, anytime that the gates would be closed and we would be thinking about pumping, you already got 1 million CFS in the main stem of the Mississippi River. Flowing all the way down through the system and into the Gulf of Mexico. So that's a lot of water anytime we would be doing pumping operations, but I'll hand that off to you.
Right, sir. So it really goes to to a percentage of that water. We're talking about 1 to 2% of the flow in the Mississippi River that we're actually adding to it from the pumps. So then you're talking about 300 to 400 about 400 river miles to actually get to the Gulf. And I think this question is actually talking about the Mississippi coast, which would require another flow path through one of the flood control structures along the Mississippi River in the New Orleans District, Bonnet-Carré Spillway. So Bonnet-Carré would have to actually be open. It's only been opened 11 or 12 times in history. Bonnet-Carré would have to actually be open for that water to make its way to the Mississippi River, Mississippi Gulf Coast. So while that's not very likely, the bigger point here is that we're just not adding that much flow to the Mississippi River from the pumps.
Yeah, and I think that last point you made is key, right? As a percentage of the flow, again, as we mentioned earlier, almost immeasurable. So I think this is a good time. Kent, I'm gonna give you a heads up here. I'm gonna come to you in just a second to talk a little bit about the MR&T. You know, we talked about a system earlier with the Yazoo basin. And this particular project is part of that larger system that includes the reservoirs, the large reservoirs in North Mississippi as a key component as well. But what Drew just talked about, when you broaden the aperture a little bit, you know, just outside of the backwater area in the Delta, you know, it's part of a much larger system, and that's the Mississippi River and Tributaries Project, you know, that's designed to convey up to 3 million cubic feet per second, what they call a project design flood. So we don't have another 1927, and to get that safely through the area. So Kent, would you talk a little bit about the MR&T and how this fits into that?
Yes, sir. The Mississippi River and Tributaries Project was authorized by Congress in 1928 by the Flood Control Act, right after the 27 flood, when the levees broke in the mid-delta and flooded land for 6 months. Basically, the MR&T has 4 features to it. It has the channel improvement features, it has levees, it has floodways and backwater areas, and then it has interior features like Drew has described on the Yazoo Basin. Channel improvement features are the dikes and the revetment that we have along the Mississippi River to control the channel and keep navigation open, basically over the whole time of drought and flood times. The Mississippi River and levees protects to the project design flood, as the Colonel said. That's in excess of 3 million CFS flowing down the river. Basically, the floodways and backwater areas, there's 4 of those, 4 of those located from Memphis south. And then we have a lot of interior features on the Yazoo, St. Francis, and the Beth Tinsall, other rivers that drain into the Mississippi River. So the MR&T is a big project. It has a BC ratio of like 94 to 1, meaning for every dollar we spent, we've got 94 in return. And basically in the 2011 flood, it paid for itself just during that one flood event when we exceeded the stages in a lot of places that have been not seen since 1927. So it's a good value for the nation. We've spent something like $16 million on that project over the last 75 years.
That's a B, 16 billion, but you know, it's like 1.5 trillion on savings. And do the math, I don't think I have the math, I'm doing combat math in front of everybody on that, but it is about a 94-to-1 benefit to cost ratio on the whole MRT system. So incredible there. So thank you, Kent, for talking a little bit about how this fits into the larger system. So I want to come back to wetland assessments, and I think Dr. Berkowitz, this one's going to be for you. Why did the Corps decide to limit its wetland assessment to the 2-year floodplain?
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you for the question. The wetlands have been defined in the 1987 Corps of Engineers Wetland Delineation Manual, as well as in other documents. And while we certainly recognize that there's a number of different opinions about the extent of wetlands that should be evaluated in this project, we are in some ways limited to what's in our technical guidance documents. And those documents state that wetlands are defined by areas that display wetland hydrology at a frequency of 5 years in 10, or 50% probability. This corresponds well with the 2-year floodplain, essentially areas that are flooded 50% of years or 5 out of 10, or 1 out of 2, if you will. Additionally, that guidance also coincides with the findings of the National Research Council, which stated in a report in 1995 that based on the best available data, the mean interannual frequency to establish wetland hydrology would correspond to 1 out of 2 years. And so that's why, in concert with our leadership, it was determined that we would focus on the 2-year floodplain.
All right, thank you, Dr. Berkowitz. And a little bit earlier, we were on hydraulics run with Drew, but I think we're going to stay, Dr. Berkowitz, with you. Several similar questions here. The next question: staff have said tonight that there will be no impacts to wetlands, so why will 1.3 million duck use days be lost?
Yes, this also gives me the opportunity to clarify one of the previous statements. I believe someone said that there would be no loss of wetlands associated with implementation of the project, and I just want to clarify that. There would be a small amount of wetland loss associated with the physical footprint of the pump. Where the pump is going to go, we have determined in concert with the Vicksburg District Regulatory Branch that there are some wetlands there. And if you look at the wetlands appendix, table 85, it does highlight where those direct impacts from the project footprint would be. And so we estimate that those direct impacts would be 84 acres, and that's within a project area that has an estimated over 80,000 acres of wetlands. So I just wanted to clarify that, sir.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think, that's exactly right. We've been saying that the operation of the pumps, but you're right, we have to do the construction first, so thank you for clarifying that.
So I think that was a good opportunity to make that statement. The majority of the impacts associated with the project are not related to the direct construction of the pumps. Most of the anticipated wetland impacts are related to decreased flood durations within these wetland systems. And that does have an effect on how the wetlands function. And that's where the vast majority of potential impacts associated with the project occur. And so when the question comes about the decrease in duck use days, it is not related to the conversion of wetland areas to upland or non-wetland areas. It is related to the duration of flooding associated with those particular wetlands.
All right, thank you, Dr. Berkowitz, for that. So the next question: how would this new project not hurt species of birds in the area or migrating, and would backwater flooding hurt wildlife more in that way? So this falls under Dr. Fisher in terrestrial, and he has sent us a response. I'm going to pass this over to Sarah, if you would like to hit this one.
Thank you. The Corps has investigated the potential impacts of the pumps on a wide variety of migratory birds considered by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a conservation concern. Without project, extensive backwater flooding during the spring and summer effectively eliminates the ground nesting bird guild in flooded areas. The pump project will provide improved and wider range opportunities for understory vegetation development, which is needed for some sensitive ground and near ground nesting birds such as wood thrush and the Kentucky warbler. The possible trade-off for reducing flooding is the reduction of inundation of depressional areas is important for migratory shorebirds and breeding water birds. However, in general, most bird species within the Yazoo backwater area identified by our analyses should experience few negative impacts with project implementation. Replanting of thousands of acres of agricultural lands below 87 feet elevation will have significant benefits to a wide diversity of migratory birds. Though the replanted sites will not replace lost habitat structure and functions for approximately 50 years, there are incremental benefits realized each year of the project life, resulting from successive suites of migratory bird species that exploit each successive successional vegetation community as the sites trend from sapling shrub communities to old growth forests. Additionally, increased flooding reduces suitable habitat for other terrestrial species, which reduces suitable habitat, food resources, and increases predation and disease transmission due to the concentration of these terrestrial species.
All right, thank you, Sarah, and thanks, Dr. Fisher, as well. I know you both added to that. And again, thank you for that question. Good, very good question. We're going to go to our next question, and actually the next two, I'm going to hit myself because the answers are very difficult and don't just pertain to the Corps of Engineers. The first question is, can you compare the impact of the 2019 flood on wildlife to the impact of wildlife with the pumps installed? Well, there's certainly the devastating impact on wildlife. We saw that in the 2019 flood, and to some degree the 2020 flood. I mean, anywhere you went during the 2019 flood, you could see the devastation if you rode the levees, if you saw the aftermath. But to quantify that becomes difficult, and we are certainly working with the state agencies in the state of Mississippi as they work to quantify that as well. But we don't have fully that data yet or full understanding of that, and we continue to work with them to get that. So then it becomes difficult to compare that with, you know, with the pumps installed, you're looking at certain elevations, what's the difference in that elevation, and so how much wildlife will be destroyed, that becomes very hard to know specifically. So we have that question, we will address it as best we can during this process, but again, we continue to work with state agencies to understand fully the impact from 2019, and then perhaps we can compare that to when the pumps are installed. But clearly, if it's a lower flood elevation, you would then assume that it would have a less of an impact. Question 30, how much money is spent by homeowners and landowners on loans, mortgages, land rent, etc., on land and property that is unusable due to floodwater? Again, that's a great question, not one that we necessarily track specifically at the Corps. I know we continue to work with state agencies as they gather that information. And quite frankly, while I am sure that it is a great deal of money, I don't know that dollar amount specifically. But thank you for that question. I think it is certainly relevant. In this particular case, certainly in 2019, we talk about an area that is flooded 9 out of the last 10 years. And the expenses then that, you know, this goes back into some of the environmental justice ideas that impact a year in and year out on households and on businesses is certainly significant. So thank you for that question. I do think it's relevant, And sorry that we don't have a specific answer for that. So this one is specifically to Dr. Berkowitz. Dr. Berkowitz, can you also expand on the function loss of wetlands from backwater flooding, even though it can't be fully calculated yet?
Yes, thank you for that question. That is an area that we've been doing some work recently. Unfortunately, the full set of data required to quantify the negative impacts associated with these long-duration floods to wetlands is not available for the backwater study area. However, there is a recent publication, peer-reviewed journal publication, that evaluated the effects of long-term flooding to wetland functions within the lower Mississippi River Valley. That study showed that prolonged inundation periods that correspond with the timeframes we're seeing in the backwater decrease some wetland functions as much as 22%. And so we do anticipate that there are negative implications for these long-term floods to wetland functions, and we will continue to work to quantify those moving forward.
All right, thank you, Dr. Berkowitz. Here's a good one. Will the panel be reading and answering all the questions? He seems to be jumping around. I am jumping around a little bit, and so I say that because, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are 3 different ways that questions are coming in to us tonight. One is on your Facebook feed, which you might be seeing. The other is through email at yazoobackwater@usace.rn.mil. And the other is via voice or text. And again, the number is 601-392-2237. So we are pulling those from all 3 of those different mediums. And so we're trying to share between those. So it may look, if you're looking at the Facebook feed, then I'm not following that exactly. But that's why, because we're pulling from multiple locations. Will we answer all of those questions? We will not answer all those questions tonight in the time allotted. As I mentioned earlier, any question that is not directly answered tonight will go into the official public comment period to be addressed. So if your question doesn't specifically get answered by someone on this panel, you can know that it's going to this same team to be addressed. And so it will get addressed, just not specifically, it may not get addressed here specifically. So just know that it's certainly not wasted, it's going to the team, and it'll be addressed. Can someone on the panel please state again, if this project was approved today, what the anticipated start date would be and the anticipated completion date on the project? You know, earlier, Brandon talked about, once the project were approved and funded, design and construction would take several years. Now that's somewhat vague, because we don't know. I mean, I'll say this, and I'll hand it off to either Drew or Brandon. As a project-funded organization, we get funded for a specific project, and then we begin the design for that project and then the construction. And so, but I don't want to just leave it at that. I'll give you what I think is my best guess. If we had the funding today, as we said earlier, there is no specific design, and we can't be doing the design on this because I don't have that funding, right? I have to be specifically given that funding. And so while a lot of people say, well, why aren't you doing parallel design? Because I have to be specifically given that funding from Congress to do that. And so in reality, if we go forward and this were to get approved, it would go through the next budget cycle. And so that funding is really not going to come until sometime later next year. That's just not what I think a lot of people want to hear, but that's reality. And then we start the design. And again, this is not an off-the-shelf project or not off-the-shelf parts. It's got to be designed. The pumps have to be specifically built. There's construction pieces to this. And so that's why when we say several years, it's a little bit vague. It seems a little long, But there is an appropriations process, a budgeting process, an appropriations process, and laws that we have to follow in doing that. You know, and so, you know, and there are certain things that have to be done first, you know, initial design items and plans and specs, and then contractual lead times. And so there's a path that we follow, and we will certainly do that as fast as we can. But I think what you would see if it were approved today, it would be sometime later in FY21 where you would see potentially, right, the funding, and then things would kick off, and we keep you updated. And I know that may not satisfy, and I do apologize for that. Next question, has the EPA made a decision on whether moving the pumps to Deer Creek falls within the veto? And where is that decision available? Again, as we talked about, this is looking at a very specific alternative and looking at the impacts of that. So really, it's two separate, in my opinion, it's two separate items. And so that in some ways that's not relevant. I mean, I think EPA will comment. I can't speak for the EPA. I think the EPA will comment on this report. And I think we go from there. And so I think it's not that they are making a decision on a veto, not veto, whether the movement of the pumps falls under that. They're just going to comment on this report. And we'll see what comments we get by 30 November. And then we'll go from there. Next question. Could you please provide the technical guidance document that you referred to regarding why the Corps only evaluated wetlands in the 2-year floodplain? And could you tell us the date that it was issued? It is clear that wetlands exist above the 2-year floodplain, and the 2008 EPA veto concludes that wetlands above the 2-year floodplain would be impacted by the project. Is it the Corps' view that your technical guidance overrides the facts on the ground and EPA's conclusions? Dr. Berkowitz, you want to?
Thank you, sir. And again, thank you for this important question. As I mentioned earlier, there are a number of ways and approaches to decide what portion of the study area would be evaluated for any study, not just for this study. I mentioned earlier that we, in conjunction with our leadership, decided to focus on the 2-year floodplain because that aligns with much of the technical guidance. The specific documents that contain that information are the 2010 U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Regional Supplement to the Wetland Delineation Manual. Additionally, there is a document that is our technical standard for identifying wetland hydrology. That document was published in 2005. And I'm sure that as part of the reporting associated with these questions and comments that go into the official record, we can enter those documents into the record to address this question. I'd also like to add that in terms of the impacts to wetlands, as we state in the report, recent studies have indicated that precipitation plays a much larger role than was previously believed in supporting these wetland areas. And as Sarah and others have touched on earlier, that gives us further confidence that operation of the pumps will not result in the conversion of upland areas will not result in the conversion of wetland areas to uplands or non-wetland areas. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Berkowitz. Next question. Will the low flow wells flood any property downstream? Anyone want to talk about one? Hydraulics, Kent, low flow? Yeah. Yep, go ahead, Drew. Yeah.
Yes, sir, so that's a good question. We're really looking at a very minimal amount of water overall that those wells would provide. And that is not all concentrated in one stream. So that's We're looking at 5 CFS, no more than 5 CFS, I think, per well. There'll be numerous wells on the headwater of the stream, but we're looking at 50, maybe 50 CFS in any given stream that the wells would supplement. And then we're also looking at a very supplementing those streams in a very dry, low water period. That's the key. Is that those wells will be operated when there's very little water in these streams already, very little flow. So adding 50 CFS to those streams will not induce any kind of flooding.
Okay, thanks, Drew. So why did the Corps fail to consider even a single alternative to the destructive and dangerous Yazoo pumps? I'm going to hand this to Sarah. And as I said earlier, it had to do with the economics question. Is the focus of this report were environmental impacts, and what we do know is that conditions have changed. Our understanding of the system has changed, and so we were focused on updating it. So Sarah, you want to take this one, please? Yes, we're sharing.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. The 2007 Maine report and SEIS looked at numerous alternatives, including structural, non-structural, and a combination of both for their alternatives. Again, as was previously mentioned, this project only updates the environmental impacts based on our new period of record, our improved digital elevation model, and also on our new hydraulic and environmental data and analyses. So we just took the recommended plan from the 2007 Maine report, and we are merely updating it based on the new information. Thank you.
Yeah, but I would also like that. I mean, it is a new proposal. I mean, in essence, when we talk about the low flow fields, well fields, and the additions and a better understanding, in so many ways it is, we consider a new proposal. And a different understanding of the area. Much is made of, next question, much is made of your sampling of soil moisture in the limited area of your forest soil study in 2019. Was the research question posed at the outset of your research confined only to the sample stations in the National Forest land, or was it meant to be applied to the entire Yazoo backwater area? Certainly, your research conclusions have been applied to the whole area. The entire wetland section hangs on them. What was the specific research problem you were trying to answer? And so, Dr. Berkowitz, I will throw that one to you, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. The study was designed to understand, get a better understanding of the wetland hydrology within the study area. And that is, relates to what happens in the forested lands of the Delta National Forest and other locations, as well as what's happening on some of the restored agricultural lands within the project area. And so the data set, I think the question suggests to some extent that the data is not representative of the study area, and I'd like to take a moment and address that. Of course, as scientists, we always want more data, but the fact that we had 56 water table monitoring locations that were maintained for periods up to 10 years is really a much larger and robust data set than we see in most other studies. So in terms of on-site data across a large geographic area sustained for many years, we feel confident that the results are representative of the study.
All right, thank you, Dr. Berkowitz. Maps in the draft SCIS do not show reductions in flood levels around Eagle Lake. Could you please explain that in the light of the core staff statement made earlier tonight, that the pumps will protect the Eagle Lake community. Hydraulics, Drew?
Yes, sir, I got that one. So I will reference figure 2-108 in the Appendix G engineering for this specific question and the one earlier. That particular figure references essentially the with and without project 100-year frequency flood. So as stated earlier, the previous 100-year flood without the pump was calculated at about 100.2 feet in elevation. The with project flood level at the 100-year frequency in the area would be about 95.6 or 7. And so, real specifically looking at the Eagle Lake area, what you see there is a difference in shades of blue. The darker shade of blue shows what would be inundated with the pump, and it does show a definite change in the flood extent at Eagle Lake. Even though that is a low resolution map, you can see where floodwaters actually stay on the outside or the non-lake side of Eagle Lake Shore Drive and Highway 465. The light shading that you see under there is significant flooding due to the non-pump condition, which is the 100.2 elevation. So there's a distinct difference in those two, and then the blue that you see in the lake is just the water on the lake that we actually modeled. But that distinction in those two colors is prevalent, and it should be noted that that's the difference in about 4.5 to 5 feet of flood water. While 95.6 or 7 does get into those fields to the south of the lake, it stays on the non-lake side of the Eagle Lake Shore Drive.
All right, thank you, Drew. All right, so our next question, and depending on how long we go on this could be our final question given the allotted time that we have. And again, if your question didn't get answered, it becomes part of the record that we address. So don't be concerned if it didn't get answered by this panel. It is still getting answered by these and addressed by these same people that use the question that you sent in. So now here's one in all caps, and I don't know if all caps mean something or it just came that way. So if you had funding approval and design approval, which I know will take at least 2 years, once give a go, how long does a project of this magnitude need to be completed so that residents of this area get relief? And I would say there would be a lot of people that would hesitate to throw something out there, an estimate. But I'll throw something out there. I'm okay with that. I think at the earliest, and this is just realistic, and we've talked about the budgeting process. We've talked about this is a unique structure with unique construction. I think you're realistically talking about at least 4 to 5 more seasons, right, without the pumps. So you're looking for full construction of the whole project. If it were approved, no roadblocks between now and then. And there are roadblocks that can potentially be out there between design and full construction. You're talking 2025 season, most likely at the earliest. And that seems so far away, and I get that. But that's just realism. That's being able to get, in the queue for funding, be able to get that funding potentially from Congress, being able to then take that funding and do the design, then a company being able to build the pumps that would go into this, and then be able to get that contract on the street. There's just a lot of things that would go into that. And so I think realistically, for full construction, you're looking out into that range of 2025. And so that'll be an ongoing discussion. If we get to that point, of approved and appropriated, we'll certainly have that discussion and have updates to you all. And we'll find ways, we talk about the core as revolutionizing, we will find ways, we do that every day. We're even doing it on this project of how do we find better ways to do it? How do we find more efficient ways to do it? And so you can believe that we're going to do that. You can absolutely believe that. But that's, I mean, that really is my best estimate, at this point. And it's, you know, one step at a time, and that step tonight has been this public meeting, for the draft supplemental number 2. And so we have come to the conclusion, we're out of our allotted time. Again, your comments will be added to the register here and will get addressed. We certainly appreciate, first, the folks of the New Orleans district and the Vicksburg district that have been up here to answer questions, and certainly the experts from the Engineer Research and Development Center, a world-renowned organization. And we appreciate your work on this project, and then for being here tonight, and also being on the other end of the computers and answering questions and getting those back to us so we can send those out to the folks on the other end. And thank you to you all who tuned in and who have sent comments in. You know, this NEPA process is about transparency. It's about putting it out there, letting you read it, and letting you comment on it, and we have a conversation about it. This NEPA process, this public comment period, started on October 16th. It ends on 30 November. And so you have until 30 November to get us your questions and concerns. And we will continue to work on those, and we'll get those back out at the end of this process so you can see it. Again, if you'd like more information on the project or how to provide comments, you can see it. It's up behind us. You can visit our website, or you can contact our public affairs office at 601-631-5000. Again, thank you for being part of this process, and thank you for having an interest in this incredible project. It's a really important project. Again, thank you all for being with us, and have a good evening. Thank you.